Ladies and gentlemen, it's 5 o'clock in London, it's 12 o'clock in New York. Indeed, it should be 12 o'clock in Miami, where I am now, but indeed, I'm recording slightly earlier. We'll get to that in a moment. It's 1 a.m. in Hong Kong, 4 a.m. in Sydney, 9 a.m. in San Francisco, and 11:30 at night in Mumbai. Greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Patrick L. Young, the IPO-VID Livestream, Series 22, Episode 4, that is in the aggregate. Episode number 130 starts here. So first up, let me say that I am actually recording this today. I'm still in Miami. I'm about to get on a plane to go to Bangkok in Thailand. I'm really looking forward to that because we are on our way to the AFM conference, the AFM's 26th annual conference. It's going to be taking place next Thursday and Friday. It's going to be the 1st and 2nd of February. And it's going to be a marvelous opportunity to catch up with the world's leading emerging markets exchanges, some great speakers at the conference, record turnout as well. Bravo, Christy Kasha and all of the team from the AFM on what they've managed to achieve this year. We're looking forward to being hosted by the Thai Futures Exchange, who I'll be meeting before the conference. And of course, we're going to be in the incredible, sunny, wonderful, pulsing city of Bangkok for that event on the 1st and 2nd of February, the 26th annual conference. And moreover, I'm delighted to say that I am the opening keynote speaker. So I'm looking forward to that. I'll be giving some of the information, some of the stuff that you're going to see more often if you're booking me for conferences during the course of 2024. Because of course, what is this? This is not only the culmination of the 10th anniversary year of Exchange Invest, but we're now into a very exciting year. July the 1st, 2024 marks the 25th anniversary of the first ever best-selling book of what then became FinTech, Capital Market Revolution, written by my good self. Your host for today, Patrick L. Young, and indeed, if you'd like to hear more about that, and you're not going to be at the AFM conference, well, consider booking us for a conference during the course of the year. We've got very, very reasonable rates for the insights you'll find into not just the past history of the development of digital markets, but indeed where we're going looking forward. And remember, nobody has a better track record in print over the course of the last 25 years than us and our wondrous little consultancy and operations, and indeed as espoused by Exchange Invest, our newsletter. Now, in Exchange Invest this week, we've had some epic stories. When all said and done in the world of crypto, and who knows where that's actually going to pan out per se in regulatory terms, there has been a huge achievement for the SEC, which has often been marked by what's been going on in the crypto world in recent years. Gary Gensler has concluded an epic journey. That journey began in 2008 in the aftermath of the banking collapses of that huge and epochal period of banking crisis. Gensler was the man who, as chairman of the CFTC, pushed the OTC interest rate markets onto central counterparty clearing, something we'd argued for many years before was going to be somewhat inevitable. Of course, the world of OTC traders all laughed at that until their market imploded. Now, as chairman of the SEC, a couple of presidential terms later, Gary Gensler is seeing through the conclusion of this whole epic interaction with the world of finance. US Treasury bond futures, they're now being cleared on the Central Counterparty Clearinghouse at FICC, which is a division of DTCC, the monopoly that clears US equities. An incredible achievement, and certainly something which in history will go down as a great testament to the achievements of Gary Gensler as chairman both of the CFTC and the SEC. Meanwhile, Tradeweb, they've completed their acquisition of the technology provider R8fin, a very swift closing there to the deal, which was announced in Q4, late November last year. We reported it in Exchange Invest 2817 on the 20th of November, in fact. I sincerely hope this deal works out for all parties as Tradeweb integrates the algo trading firm focused on bonds and rates. Over in Israel, a fantastic vote of confidence in the parish, in Tel Aviv, in the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, in Israel as a whole, and indeed, as I say, the parish of exchanges as a whole. The billionaire hedge fund manager, Bill Ackman, and his wife have bought a 4.9% stake in a fundraising by the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, TASE, and they're looking to raise that money in order to bring forward their ongoing digital technology transformation. Good luck to them with that implementation, and great to see an august investor such as Mr. Ackman pushing his money, his personal money, $25 million worth of it, into the parish of exchanges. And then we're back to Thailand, the SET, the Stock Exchange of Thailand, who of course own the Thai Futures Exchange, TFEX, who are going to be our hosts in Thailand this week. They have announced a fascinating new 3-year strategic plan to raise confidence in the capital market. Bravo, I say. We need capital markets, and the Thai capital market is certainly going to be something which will help power the growth of not just Thailand, but the Southeast Asian region in years to come. That as a result, again, ladies and gentlemen, let me say this is being recorded because I'm still in Miami. I haven't quite left yet at the point where this is. By the time you watch this, I should be landing in Thailand, in Bangkok, ahead of the conference itself. I'm very, very much looking forward to that 26th annual AFM conference. But let's get to today's business at hand. It's the IPO-VID annual review of 2023, the year in revolution, part 2. And I'm delighted to say that today we've got some epic content from, amongst others, Sturgess, Eamonn, Butler, Ira Harris, Scott Shellady, Hamish McRae, Susan Gidel, Rainer Zitelmann, Mark Wheatley, Andreas Schweitzer, Andrea Corcoran, Blondin, John Ensley, Berg, Richard Sandor, Lucas Schmeddes, Johan, Norberg, Stephen Donofrio, and Steve Zwick. They're all discussing where the capital market revolution goes next, beginning this 25th anniversary year, as I mentioned earlier, of the book's publication. So let's get straight to it and move to South Africa. Our first guest this evening, he was recorded on D-Day, no less, the anniversary thereof, that epic Normandy landing. Talking about the AFM, Africa and Commodities, a former chairman of the AFM, the man who ran the South African Exchange's commodities division within JSE, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange at one point in time. Sturgess, really looking forward to seeing him by the time you're watching this. I'll be seeing him for dinner tomorrow night, actually, in Bangkok. Should be an epic occasion. Very, very much looking forward to that keynote. But enough of me. Let's hear from Chris.
Just finding, and you can see from certain governments where there are changes happening in that underlying government sector, where there's an openness to really move to more consistent policies. And I think that really unlocks so many opportunities for investment into Africa.
So there we are, ladies and gentlemen. We're a quarter century into the capital market revolution. And the point is change. Change, change, change. The world is changing around us. There are changes happening in the government sector. And that's just so encouraging to see, particularly when you're dealing with somewhere like South Africa, which has had so many challenges as a state in recent years. Great to see government openness. I hope that is going right around the world so that we can deregulate and help produce better markets and better opportunities for everyone to raise all boats in prosperity. Thank you, Chris, for being such a great contributor to the show. It was really good to see you. And let's move on to someone who is at the epicenter of promoting free markets per se. Eamonn Butler is the director of the Adam Smith Institute to this day. He was our guest in June last year. We were discussing Adam Smith and his legacy as an incredible economist 300 years on. Let's hear from Eamonn.
Capital markets have made investors more sophisticated. Investors have become more sophisticated, and therefore they're demanding different products and new products. So I think product innovation is going to be extremely important, and I think automation and AI, that's going to change markets. If I knew how, I would be a billionaire, but they will certainly change markets.
Magnificent message once again. We are going through change. Innovation was the message coming from Eamonn, and let's hope that we can continue to innovate with the sort of exciting trends that we've seen over the first quarter century of capital market revolution, ladies and gentlemen. It was a joy to see the director of the Adam Smith Institute, Britain's probably foremost capital markets capitalist think tank, going forward with such interesting ideas. Speaking of great capitalists, a man who was on a great journey was our next guest. Moving on, we have Ira Harris. Ira was, well, one of those people who began as an inveterate lefty at university, started studying markets in order to understand why they were such a failure, and gradually realized that actually they were the solution and not the problem. Absolutely superb to have had Ira on the show. He was also our guest a couple of weeks ago, previewing what's happening in the world this year. And that's a very, very interesting show to look at. If you get a chance, drop in by whatever channel you're on here, look for IPO-VID, and you'll be able to find our predictions from the year coming from Ira Harris and also Susan Gidel, who we're going to hear from in a few minutes as well. So Ira, former board member of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group, very hugely experienced, half a century of trading macro markets across the world. Let's hear from Ira in Chicago.
I'm a big believer. You can talk about my self-interest. But my self-interest emanates from the fact that I see this is that they're going to change the way the entire fee structure works in the financial world. And that's what blockchain will be good at.
And in fact, I slightly wrongly distributed Ira there, because of course he was coming from much sunnier climes rather than his Chicago home when he was talking to us there. But a man who's very famous as a man who had many years of trading on the Chicago floors and then electronically thereafter. Fascinating. The fee structure of markets is going to change. That's a very, very interesting third pedestal to add to our change and innovation messages of our guests so far. Moving on from Ira's great contribution, we had someone who's also very famous from the pits in Chicago, now out of that great city and has moved a little bit further south. Scott Shellady, host of the Cow Guy Close show on RFD TV. He was our guest for episode 113 on 11th of July this year. We were chewing the market cud with the Cow Guy. Let's face it, how else could we manage to avoid such a title with such a famous man known for his great and wondrous jackets? Let's hear from Scott.
And if we try to embrace that change, we'll have a chance of moving forward with that change. And I think that, as I said before, so artificial intelligence is going to be a big deal. It's already kind of being a big deal. You want to get on board it. You don't want to resist it, and see where it takes you, and keep an open mind. Always really embrace the fact there are going to be some bad things. That's going to be with anything.
Resistance is useless. Artificial intelligence, it's going to be a huge thing. That was a message which also was first brought to us during the conversation we were having about Adam Smith 300 years on. There was a man who didn't think about artificial intelligence per se in his outlook, because he was, of course, purely living in an analog century. But nonetheless, Eamonn Butler brought us that whole concept, and Scott was really ramming it home there. The whole point about artificial intelligence, some bad bits to it, but it's overall going to be a good innovation per se. So moving on from Scott, who was giving us that great Cow Guy perspective, given his many years of experience working around the world in different markets and so on, we move on to Hamish McRae. A good man, fabulous futurist in the world per se, and also an acclaimed author and very, very prolific journalist over a long career. He came to us from his summer abode in Scotland, and let's hear from Hamish.
It's very basic. There's the money, there's the need. How do we make sure the people who are stumping up the savings are given appropriate products that will then pay for them in their retirement or whatever they want to do? How are the investors, how are the companies wanting to do investment? How will they create the products which will be useful and successful for those investors? And I think if you go back to that, I think the big revolution will be trying to figure out straightforward mechanisms for creating these things and distributing them.
So, a great message from Hamish McRae, also an adjunct professor at Trinity College in Dublin, telling us that what we're looking for in the process of innovation, in the process of product development, is finding a wonderful way that we can better manage to get the huge walls of money to meet the investment opportunities of the future. A fascinating point from the man who brought us that absolutely terrific book, The World in 2050, Hamish McRae. Moving on from Hamish in Scotland, we arrive at someone who was definitively in Chicago for the course of her conversation, Susan Gidel. Susan's financial astrologer. She was also on our show with Ira Harris just a few weeks ago, talking about the future of how 2024 is going to pan out. Really interesting, actually. I thought that was one of the most fascinating things. We got a massive, massive tectonic shift, for want of a better description, in the astrological world during the course of the astrological universe, I suppose I might say, during the course of this year. And thus, Susan, with her financial astrology, she gave us a more broad overview on how astrology, the markets, and you mesh together last July. Let's hear from Susan.
I think it goes toward what I call the air economy. Over the next 200 years, we're shifting into an economy that will value air ideals. We as a society, and as represented by the companies that will do well to support what we as a society want will have elements of air associated with them. For example, online learning, wind turbines for energy, things like that. Artificial intelligence for sure. And personally, I think ultimately the NASDAQ 100 could become the institutional benchmark as we go through this.
Two fascinating points there. One, the possibility that NASDAQ's tech-heavy institutional benchmark, the NASDAQ 100, could really be the index of the future as we move towards this fascinating 200-year air economy. Stunning stuff there from Susan Gidel. As I say, check out her show with Ara Harris from a couple of weeks ago. Really, really interesting predictions looking towards the macro trends of what's going to be happening during the course of 2024. That allows us to elegantly move on to someone who has been a huge advocate for macro trends and most of all a great advocate for free markets. Rainer Zitelmann, German historian, sociologist and multiple best-selling author. He's got, oh gosh, no less than 26 books in print, all of them bestsellers, and they include In Defense of Capitalism, which needs no introduction in terms of the title, does exactly what it says inside its pages, defending our free market structure. We were talking to him in the middle of September after our summer break about The Wealth Elite, another of his fascinating books. Let's hear from Rainer.
I think in a lot of countries, we will have a lot of economic problems, economic growth, and the growth of the wealth elite and the number of wealthy people depends, of course, on economic growth in general.
So the point is, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about economic growth. If your government is not helping you pursue economic growth, then we can't have wealthy people. More importantly, we can't have the rest of the world's citizenry growing more wealthy. Very interesting remark there. Somewhat echoes the comments of, say, Xavier Milei, the new president of Argentina, when he went to Davos the other week in order to school the socialists on what needs to be a new free market economy embrace, rather than the current rather command and control approach by certain nations' governments. From a lot of fabulous discussions about planet Earth, mixed in with a little bit of astrology and the stars, we move on elegantly to Mark Wheatley. Mark Wheatley is a councilman of the Corporation of London. He's a leading consultant in financial markets and thereabouts. And more importantly, he came along to talk about us from the city to space. Just after this event, we were actually delighted to be in London, Beata, my wife and I, in order to participate in a round table about the space economy, something the City of London is taking super seriously, as you do when you're a 1,000-year-old financial centre and you're looking towards where the economy of the next 1,000 years is going to be. Let's hear from Mark.
Our forebears in the City of London were fascinated by what space could represent. We in the City of London right now should be, I believe we will be, and that's why I believe we'll prosper by going up.
It's outer space. I believe we will prosper by going up. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. What can we say? A message which basically is the investment equivalent of to infinity and beyond, coming from our great guest from the middle of last year, Mark Wheatley. Moving on from Mark, we reach Andreas Schweitzer, and we were talking about, well, the fascinating issue of trade finance as an asset class. Everybody knows about what happened to the Ever Given when it did a little handbrake turn and blocked the Suez Canal. A lot of people are concerned at the moment about what's happening in the Red Sea with the Houthis and so on, which was something that broke out after we had this discussion in a much larger scale. At the same time, of course, we've got a problem in the post-El Nino environment in South America at the moment, where the Panama Canal has very, very low levels of water and they can't get enough container ships are not able to get through there at the same pace as previously because there is literally a lack of liquidity. Andreas was giving us some fascinating insights into how trade finance can play a role in every portfolio and as an investment tool. Let's hear from Andreas Schweitzer.
I'm not a capital markets guy. I don't understand the stock market. I understand, of course, intellectually, but I only lost money on private equity and VC. Trade is my world. And that's why I put it in a book that trade works. The revolution, certainly the fintech revolution, hopefully will go on in a dramatic way. AI will add to that development because fintech for us, if we have easier ways of payment, if we have easier ways of handling transaction, that would be absolutely a blessing.
If we had easier ways of doing payments, that would be absolutely a blessing indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are 25 years into the capital market revolution, and in some ways, where payments were easier 10 years ago than they are today due to many issues with both the technologies, the growing pains of fintech, and also the huge burden of the regulatory economy upon businesses today. AI, fintech, those are amongst the messages coming from the supposedly simple world of bulk carriers and moving every kind of different object and commodity and end product across the world by ship, by aircraft, and indeed also by trucks and trains. Andreas Schweitzer was a magnificent guest. He's the managing director of London-based Argent Capital. He was talking about trade finance as an asset class. Pick out and check out his book as well. It's a very, very good read. And we move on to our 10th guest in this segment, which was Andrea Corcoran. She's the principal of Align, a leading consultancy in the regulatory space in the US and around the world. She's the former CFTC Director of International Affairs. In fact, she was the nascent CFTC Director of International Affairs, taking the CFTC to the world market. And that's why in October we were discussing going global, the birth of the CFTC. Let's hear from Andrea.
There are lots of opportunities to increase access to finance through new technology and to mobilize capital to promote innovation and growth and economic health. And we've done it in the past, and I think we can do it again. And sort of as a coda, I would like to channel as my final word based on Abigail Adams, who was the wife of one of our founding fathers, who she said to her husband, "Don't forget the ladies," when she made the Constitution. But I have another plea, because the ladies were all here today. My plea is, please don't forget the human. We still make things happen, and we make markets great.
Don't forget the ladies. How could we, with the likes of the irrepressibly brilliant Andrea Corcoran, amongst those who've been the guests on our show this year, indeed Susan Gidel, who we were talking about just a few moments ago, amongst others. And we've got Berg to come, ladies and gentlemen. Great interaction there with Andrea Corcoran, very much a delightful contrast to Andreas, who was the guest before her. So thank you to her, and please, yes, indeed, let's not forget the humans. AI is vital, but humans ultimately make that special difference in the world of economic growth. Now, when we're thinking about humans and moving on from that topic, we can think about what happens when genius fails. And that brings us very elegantly to this week's Book of the Week. Don't forget, if you want to know what is the Book of the Week in advance, then why don't you sign up for our Exchange Invest Weekend newsletter? That's a look at the macro topics of the week rather than something that's very specifically exchange-based. It includes the first mention of our upcoming Book of the Week, and it's absolutely free, that newsletter, ladies and gentlemen, every week of the year. You can sign up to that at exchangeinvest.com, although when you're signing up to it, do think about taking a free trial to Exchange Invest, the newsletter of the Bourse Business, and having a look at that if you want to stay up to date with the parish of markets and market structure around the world, which is, of course, our daily publishing bread and butter, and therefore it's thanks to those subscribers that we're able to bring you live streams such as this. Thank you to all our subscribers, indeed all our sponsors of Exchange Invest for that. And don't forget, if you're more interested in the digital asset world, we have a spin-out publication, BitCarnage, which looks at the world of the future of digital assets and crypto-related market structures. You can actually get that, first of all, as part of your Exchange Invest subscription, exchangeinvest.com, or alternatively, if you just want BitCarnage as a standalone, you can get that from Substack if you want to drop by there and look for BitCarnage. Anyway, when genius failed, well, Andrea Corcoran was talking about the whole issue of human interaction just a few moments ago and how it really, really matters. The Roger Lowenstein book is all about the rise and fall of long-term capital. It's a story that has genius, hubris, and a huge amount of money being both invested and lost. Actually, as I commented at the time on various occasions in various fora and indeed in print, essentially long-term capital management, LTCM, had impeccably perfect maths. Unfortunately, the universe displayed slight flaws. That's our book of the week. Really worth reading about how even the most intelligent folks around can manage to get it comprehensively wrong in terms of what goes on in financial markets and investment themselves. And that brings us elegantly to one of our other fabulous guests of this year, Rod Blondin. He was joining us also from South Africa. Rod was the predecessor to Chris Sturgess, running the agricultural commodity markets of SAFEX. I first met him, when Capital Market Revolution first came out, when I had the joy of traveling South Africa with him, going to conferences and also talking about all sorts of things in the South African market structure context. Our title for that show was Commodity Markets on the Road with Rod Blondin, which we recorded last October. He's formerly the South African Commodities Attaché to the United Nations and the EU before he got into the exchange commodity business and got on the road in order to talk all about markets. Let's hear from the irrepressible Rod Blondin.
Revolution might sound very sexy and exciting, but I think there's more evolution than revolution. I'm a commodity guy, so let me give you a commodity view. I think that if there are any commodities left worth exploring, they are going to be environmentally or green-based, something like fresh water. I think where there's a scarcity and where maybe need some type of market evolution to address that, or even something like seaweed. Maybe that's the commodity of the future, but something environmentally.
What a fabulous couple of products that Rod manages to mention specifically, as well as talking about the evolution, revolution, and trying to find the rest of where is the future in commodities. Of course, since Rod made that announcement, we've seen one very, very interesting green commodity coming out. The US government is working with, amongst others, the Intercontinental Exchange, S&P Global. They're looking at effectively hydrogen-related futures, green hydrogen, which is going to be a very, very sustainable source of energy in the future. That looks absolutely fascinating as a market, particularly if it comes out with that US government backing and the excellent skills of the good folks of S&P Global and also indeed ICE. He was also talking about water. Good grief, I think I've said it before in the show, but I mean, 24 years ago, in the January 2000 edition of the FIA, Futures Industry Association's monthly bulletin, a lot of people were asked to write about what they would see happening in the world in 2020. PLY, me, Patrick L. Young. I wrote about the fact that I thought water futures would be something that would be hugely exciting at that point in time. I also mentioned the fact that I think Prime Minister of Malaysia would be Mr. Mahathir, which was also correct. Quite staggering altogether. And I managed to pull that one out of the hat. So, water, seaweed, really, really interesting market. Something that's quite fascinating altogether with huge potential in so many different areas. I think those are really, really incredible topics. Great to see Rod Blondin enjoying retired life in South Africa and still making such great pressing comments. Let's move on from Rod and we can talk to John Ensley. So John Ensley was talking about how to bank on yourself. He's a leading financial planner in the USA and he showed us some really, really fascinating ways to save and create wealth through a particularly unique approach which works in the USA thanks to the wonders of the IRS's tax code. Let's hear from John talking about the capital market revolution.
To mind is hybrid. Going forward, people are going to look at more of a hybrid approach to how they do their planning. I think in previous generations, it's really been about putting money into a pension plan and letting it grow, or doing a real estate investing, or investing in a business, or whatever the case may be. I think people are going to consider those alternatives as part of the overall investment mix, maybe more than they have in the past. So I think it's going to be a hybrid approach that involves all of the markets, not just the capital markets.
The point, ladies and gentlemen, is just as we need to be holistic in ourselves, we also need to be holistic in our investments. Whatever you're going to do, it needs to be a cosmopolitan portfolio. And I suppose that brings us back very elegantly to the point that was being made earlier on by, amongst others, Hamish McRae. We've got to find the best possible structures in order to bring people and markets together going forward. fascinating guest altogether, John Ensley, something slightly different to a lot of the exchange-related people that we have during the course of the year. Nonetheless, a great episode. That catch up with the recording, which you can still find on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, depending on where you're watching this show today. Apologies once again that we're recording today. I'm afraid due to logistics and my having to get to Bangkok for the AFM's 26th annual conference, we had to run this show slightly earlier when I was in Miami, waiting to board my flight in order to get all the way to Thailand. Moving on in this show today, we have another fabulous figure from the Chicago markets. She was actually in Chicago for that show, Anne Berg. She's a truly leading global expert in commodities, just like Rob Blondin and Chris Sturgess, who were on this show before her. She's worked for, well, a myriad of different people. She's been a grain exporter, a futures trader, a director, a member of the board of Trade, the Chicago Board of Trade Board of Directors, and also worked for many years with the UN FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization, giving them a huge amount of insight into the world of markets. I think she's worked across pretty much every continent where you can actually grow stuff, and she's been in such far-flung and exciting places for long-term periods, such as Turkey, Ukraine, Vietnam, amongst others, and even the Caribbean at one point in time. So Anne Berg was the ideal guest to come on the show in October and talk about unraveling global commodities. Let's hear from Anne.
You've had this growth in commodity futures markets everywhere, because I think finally governments realize that this is a way that they can actually help either in the allocation of commodities or in price realization by producers and so on.
Again, similar to the comments made by Hamish McRae, this was the revolution in action, talking about how we've had this incredible move towards greater price transparency, trading commodities on exchanges, therefore facilitating the opportunity for growers to manage to reach the buyers in the process of what is directly the food chain in soft commodities, and also, of course, across energy markets and other kinds of commodities to reach the end user. Wonderful to have had Anne Berg on the show. That was another of our terrific Chicago guests. Someone who in Chicago is known as the Doc. He's the man who is the father of financial futures. He nurtured the financial futures business from what looked like inauspicious beginnings when a lot of people didn't want to embrace them. There is only one Professor Richard Sandor on this planet, and I truly believe it's a tragedy that we haven't managed to clone him yet. He came along for an hour of wondrous wisdom, talking from his standpoint of many things. And of course, these days, he's the CEO of Environmental Financial Products, having recently sold his very, very interesting pioneering interest rate exchange during the course of last year, the American Futures Exchange, AFX. We talked to the father of financial futures at the end of October. Let's hear from the genius, Richard Sandor.
How about space? How about all kinds of air control with space travel? How about the purchase of routes, the purchase of gate space, the use of satellites? Between AI, a world that will be tremendously different, we're going to need more efficiencies and adaptations of capital markets to meet a world that will be resource constrained and that will be interplanetary. And it's like the Wild West now, and the capital markets will expand from both the micro and the miniaturization in the world to the exact opposite, to the galaxy of the world.
Another to infinity and beyond moment with, of course, one of the broadest wide-ranging figures ever in financial markets, and certainly one of the key men who managed to develop the world of derivatives, and it is truly a derivatives world. But that's not enough for Richard Sandor. He's looking towards the derivatives universe, space being mentioned again, and many of the different options that we can have for the space economy going forward. It was a joy to see Richard during the course of October, and in such sensational form as always. That show, like Anne Berg and so many others in this show of our highlights, unmissable, ladies and gentlemen. If you didn't see the whole show, go back and watch it. Moving on, we arrive to Lucas Schmeddes. Lucas is the president and COO of the leading continental European energy exchange, ICE Index. We also had the opportunity, of course, earlier last year to talk to the man who was running the EEX, still is to this day, and that was a very, very interesting show. Two very fascinating contrasts between the two, quite different product sets amongst them. Anyway, let's hear, during the course of a title of what was a very appropriate, given the fact that Index is a gas-centric exchange, or at least the biggest gas market in Europe. Winter is coming with Lucas Schmeddes. Let's hear from Lucas.
Our markets will have to play a very important role in the upcoming ambitions beyond the wind, right? We're going through an energy transition. Those are nice words, but it means change. And as we've seen with the energy crisis, changes will cause pain, and pain will cause knee-jerk reaction. We have a lot of education to do, and we should do that because we will need these markets, which provide price signals and risk management tools to get us safely through the energy transition.
Change. All the roles that markets have to play in that process of change. It may be uncomfortable for many people in many places. It's certainly going to be a major upheaval, and we saw incredible volatility in the gas markets, which was beautifully managed by the risk transfer dudes at ICE in order to provide continuous markets throughout, despite a large number of governments and super governmental officials somewhat losing their nerve during the course of the early outbreak of the Ukrainian war after Russia invaded. Quite fascinating altogether to look at this whole thesis of what's going on. And once again, the message is change. Change at the heart of the revolution, and how to manage that in an organized fashion. And that brings us very elegantly to our next guest, Johan Norberg. So moving on to Johan, he was with us in November. He is, again, one of the leading people promoting free markets at this juncture, and that's why I think the likes of Johan, Hamish, McRae, also all of the good work of the Adam Smith Institute and everyone associated with it, the great works of Rainer Zitelmann as well. They're all very, very important, vital issues in defending our free market culture and pursuing the opportunities that are there, because without them, we won't manage to get the many efficiencies which will allow us to not just perfect the markets on Earth, but also expand them into space, as many of our guests have been talking about today. The multi-award winning author and documentary filmmaker born in Sweden, another figure a little bit like Ira Harris, who started somewhere on the very left anti-market picture and gradually realized that actually the markets were the solution, not the problem. Johan Norberg joined us to talk about the Capitalist Manifesto in November. Let's hear from Johan.
It has to be Africa when the rest of us shrinks. It'll create more population density, which will be important in Africa to create investments and opportunities and better transport links and come up with new ideas and innovations and businesses. And it's underrated. Some places will mess up big time, tremendously, and some states will continue to collapse and fail. But I do think that some will use these opportunities to create some of the next growth wonders. So we're going to have to keep at least an eye on what goes on there.
The next phase in the revolution, we're going to be looking at Africa, that continent, which was indeed the subject of such optimism early on from Chris Sturgess at the start of this show, and indeed then also followed through by Rod Blondin, our second major African guest of the year. I'm very excited to say that we're going to have some more guests from the African exchange world coming during the course of this year to IPO-VID. I'm really, really pleased to say Racy's been doing a great job in tracking down and adding some great guests to this show going forward. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you've got a thought or a nomination of someone to be a guest, please send us an email. If you know someone who'd like to sponsor this show as well, it'd be really, really welcome, because we have to spend quite a bit of our money from Exchange Invest in order to bring you this show weekly. Thanks to the wonderful efforts of our weekly production trio this week, I'm delighted to say it's been Racy herself actually producing in the gallery alongside Jamil and Fernando. Thanks to you, and thanks to all the team at Exchange Invest for the work that you've done during the course of the year. We have good grief, 10-12 person team rotating through the gallery in the course of each year's production, when we bring you 40-50 shows like this one. So that was the view from Johan Norberg, a great pioneer, advocate for capitalism, and at the same time, someone who is very, very excited about the prospect holistically for the African economy. We have had mentioned previously in the course of the year all about what are going to be the issues for environmental markets, ecological markets, and so on. Various people talking about ESG. It was a joy to have two great guests on one show this year. Stephen Zwick, a returning guest. We'll get to him in just a moment. And Stephen Donofrio, the managing director of Ecosystem Marketplace. They came together to give us the view to COP28 show as we were looking ahead at the end of November to that conference, which was a great success in Abu Dhabi last November, December. First of all, let's hear from the founder and boss of Ecosystem Marketplace, Stephen Donofrio.
And it's this idea that if we can get the voluntary carbon market to work right, to be successful, it will open up avenues for other markets, biodiversity markets or water markets that maybe have existed in different ways, maybe more niche markets, more local markets. I really see that we're finally understanding as a global community that there's a value to our climate, there's a value to nature, there's a value to people and planet, biodiversity, and we need to make sure that that price can be affirmed and it can also be backed up, and that there's a global recognition of certain prices that really do set the mark for opening up opportunities for other markets.
And once again, we're covering several of the same themes that we've seen recurring during the course of the year. The value of humans, as Andrea Corcoran was talking about earlier on, the value of markets, as every speaker has been talking about, thanks to their vast experience. You think about it, just in this clip show alone, we've got the better part of half a millennia of experience in financial markets from just that clutch of guests. Every year you can watch essentially a millennium of experience across the financial markets from the guests who appear on the 50 shows annually of Exchange Invest IPO-VID. Now, Stephen, making some great comments. The carbon markets, if they succeed, that allows us, and again we hear mention of water markets once more, and into other product areas as well that therefore can be proven to improve our planet, humankind, and so on. And that's before we even reach the opportunity to get into orbit. We've had 17 speakers so far today. Here we're going to join our last speaker. Our last guest of the year was Stephen Zwick. Steve's a former futures broker and trader in Chicago. Nowadays, he's a prolific journalist in the environmental finance space. In particular, he's written for many of the world's leading titles across the world, including Time magazine. He used to be a presenter on Deutsche Welle radio in Germany and has appeared on a multiplicity of different TV and radio shows across the years. He too was on our show with Stephen Donofrio talking about the view to COP28. So our last segment today, let's hear from Steve Zwick.
We're going to see payments for ecosystem services markets go from being regional to being more global. We're moving towards now is this trend towards nature positive that's always been theoretically been there, and companies have always said that they want to make sure they're actually delivering the benefits they say they're delivering. As long as we have good communication, good explanatory material around this, and help people understand how it works and why we need it, I think we will see this next shift to nature positive in a market-based way.
So, ladies and gentlemen, what can we say from the year in revolution, which was 2023, viewed through the question, where do you think the capital market revolution goes next, from our guests in 2023 on IPO-VID? As you can see, we are thoroughly market positive. Steve Zwick mentions how we're going to reach nature positive markets, which I think is something very, very exciting. The human element is still vitally important, even though AI is a vital trajectory as well for the overall marketplace in the world. Look, do me a favor before you go here, ladies and gentlemen, please just hit that like button. Would you give us a little bit of love? It helps. You're talking about AI. The AI algorithms would love to hear from you, and a little bit of love goes a long way in order to pushing us up those rankings so more people can hear the positive message about markets. Positive messages that have been brought to you today by a multiplicity of different guests. Don't forget, a couple of weeks ago, we had our first half of this total two-parter show with a series of equally fascinating guests talking about all sorts of things. Wasn't it sensational today? We had Christopher Sturgess giving us such a stunning, optimistic view from Africa. And I'm really, really delighted because we can surmise that in change. And that's been a recurring theme throughout the course of IPO-VID, because we're here to effectively manage, understand, and appreciate the change in markets that becomes a change for humankind and a better world for us all. Eamonn Butler, who was talking about the sophistication and innovation dynamic, which is, of course, absolutely vital for what's going on in all markets. Ira Harris, the whole new different form of fee structure that we've got to look at for financial markets going forward. We had the wonders of Hamish McRae talking to us about all sorts of different elements of the ability to match money to products. Scott Shellady, the cow guy, talking about artificial intelligence. Rainer Zitelmann giving us our great view on how economic growth drives the future of what's going on. And of course, that's going to be a future that's going to be dictated for now 200 years by the air economy, thanks to that very, very incisive discussion we had with Susan Gidel. And again, don't forget to check out the Ira Harris Susan Gidel doubleheader from a couple of weeks ago, where we were looking at the predictions for the course of 2024, some of the macro trends that you need to follow as investors and indeed staff or management in financial market structure the world over, as serviced by our newsletter, The Exchange of Information, Exchange Invest. It was wonderful to join Mark Wheatley, get him on the show, talking from the heart of the City of London, the Millennium Plus year-old financial centre, which remains the most cosmopolitan financial centre on earth, with his wonderful message, space investing to infinity and beyond. Amongst our other guests during the course of this year, it was a joy to welcome Andrea Schweitzer. He was more concerned with the plumbing of trade around the world and how trade finance interacts with that. Again, though, something that's going to be improved by the greater use of fintech, a smoother use of smoother fintech problems and problem-solving tools, and also, of course, artificial intelligence. From Andreas, we got to Andrea, and as I mentioned earlier on, Andrea Corcoran. Don't forget the ladies, absolutely vital indeed. Look at the great impact that our ladies had this year. Hopefully we'll manage to get an even better gender balance for next year, but also look at the humans, because they're vitally important to whatever is the basis of what's going on in these different financial markets. Rod Blondin, it was a joy to see him coming to us live from South Africa, the commodities veteran of South African markets. And look at what he was talking about, evolution, revolution, but also those amazing products that are going to come to us, such as water, which many other people were talking about during the year, and seaweed, which Rod was presaging as being a major marketplace. John Ensley talked about the hybrid requirement for every portfolio. That means it's going to go through seaweed, water, real estate, and of course bonds, equities, and other products during the course of the years, those which are neatly and elegantly matched across platforms, as Hamish McRae was talking about. Berg, our commodities doyen, was looking at economic growth, the growth of the commodity markets as a whole, the granular basis of commodities, and how that's going to be very, very exciting in the future. The father of financial futures, Richard Sandor himself, joined us from Florida, having made his name as the Doc in Chicago law. Originally, of course, his long march through academia and practical financial markets had begun on the west coast of the USA, where he was looking to create the first electronic futures market in 1970. That takes you back, doesn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Digital markets even there. A great pioneer, not restricted in any way by his ability to think any further. He's not just looking at the opportunity for markets on Earth, but also the opportunity for markets all the way into outer space. Another vote for the infinity and beyond economy. Then we came to Lucas Schmeddes. Lucas Schmeddes, winter is coming. He was very, very astute in discussing and talking our way through how markets worked for gas, and ultimately the possibility of restraints weren't going to work at different times in the overall gas market economy, amongst others. And therefore it was a joy to have him saying, look, it's change. Change is at the epicenter of what markets are going to go through, deliver, and indeed the market structure itself is going to change vastly as we go forward, as we try to find the best thing that works for the most people, even though there may be some tricky transitions to be made for various parties on the way through. That led us very elegantly to another great advocate for financial markets, Johan Norberg, who joined, of course, along with Rainer Zitelmann, talking about the wealth elite and so on during the course of this year. His Capitalist Manifesto, great thing to read, really, really super book altogether, ladies and gentlemen, and well worth it. Johan, He was back to earth. He was looking at Africa, the great continent, which he sees as emerging, at least in part, if not in whole, in the near future, towards markets. And indeed, mobile technology has been a game changer for the most advanced markets in the African continent already. Also very, very exciting, of course, to see that in the Middle East, in the very northern parts, we have the opportunity of new financial centres such as Abu Dhabi Global Market. We heard from Simon O'Brien in the previous show of this review of 2023. Those financial centres, very, very close. They're going to be switched on and, I do believe, thoroughly plugged into the African opportunity going forward. From Johan Norberg, that brought us to our brace of final guests looking at the road to COP 2028, Stephen Donofrio and Steve Zwick. And wasn't it marvellous to see them? The very, very exciting concept. Steve Zwick talking about nature positivity, and indeed also Stephen talking about how carbon markets open the doors to so many other products. And again, we heard mention of the likes of water, and in that nature positivity sense, we come to the end of today's show, ladies and gentlemen. We wish to say a huge thank you to all of our guests during the course of last year. We're looking forward to a very, very exciting show next week. We're going to be going from the floor to the future with author and former pit trader on the NYMEX, Brad Schaefer. That's going to be a very, very wide-ranging discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Join us. He is a fascinating guy. I thoroughly enjoyed the prep talk with Brad the other week. I think we could probably go on for weeks, like several of our guests that we've had recently. There's so much to talk about in this exciting, wonderful world of markets. Join us daily if you get the opportunity in the discussion of the world of financial market infrastructure. We'd welcome your subscription to Exchange Invest. If you can, at least give us a little like to this show, ladies and gentlemen. Help the AI algorithms realize the value that we're delivering to you and indeed to markets and market advocates the world over, whether it's on Earth, in space, in Africa, or elsewhere. My name is Patrick L. Young. I want to say a final thanks to all the team who brought you all of these magnificent IPO-VIDs during the course of last year, and in particular, our production crew today, who've been absolutely inestimably brilliant as we recorded from Miami, as unfortunately I'm going to be midway to Bangkok by the time we're supposed to go live with this show on Tuesday. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Jamil. Thank you, Racy, for your contributions specifically from the gallery today. My name is Patrick L. Young. Sorry we had to record this show. I hope nonetheless that hasn't impacted in any way on your ability to enjoy it. Thanks for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you all a great week in life and markets, and hopefully see you either on the free Exchange Invest Weekend Edition by exchangeinvest.com, Bit Carnage via Substack, or indeed the Exchange of Information, Exchange Invest. You can sign up for a free trial by exchangeinvest.com. My name is Patrick L. Young. Once again, have a great week in life and markets. We'll be back next week with Brad Schaefer.